At the end of the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, there's a very mysterious and even enigmatic incident where God tells Moshe to speak to a rock in order to bring out water for the people. The people didn't have water, and God says, speak to the rock and bring forth water. Moshe instead hits the rock, and he succeeds in bringing out water. But God's response was, and again, it's somewhat mysterious, enigmatic, that because Moshe didn't sanctify God's name by speaking to the rock, he would not be able to go into the land of Israel, he and Aharon. A few parshas later, already in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, so Moshe relates to the people how he prayed to God to overturn that decree and allow him to come into the land. He wanted more than anything is to come into the land of Israel. After leading the Jewish people for 40 years, here they are at the entrance to the land, and he can't go in. So it says that he prayed to Hashem. The word for he prayed is ve'et chanan, which also means he pleaded. He appealed to God's graciousness. But it's also a word of prayer. So the numerical value of ve'et chanan equals 515. And this actually equals the primary word for prayer, which is tefillah. Tefillah also equals 515. From this, the Midrash says that we learn that Moshe prayed 515 times to be able to come into the land of Israel. So there's a big question that we could ask here regarding prayer in general. If Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest prophet, the greatest leader, prayed 515 times to be able to come into the land, and he was not allowed to come in, what are we supposed to understand about prayer? Because if someone like Moshe's prayers are not answered, so we could think, well, how are our prayers going to be answered? So first of all, we should know that prayer is so much more than just making requests of God and expecting to be answered. That isn't really reality. Prayer is so much more than that. And we know grammatically the whole idea of prayer is in grammar is lehit palel, which is reflexive, which means it comes back upon us. It's a reflexive verb, the et palel. And so here we learn that, yes, we do make requests of God. We do for ourselves, for others, for all of Israel, for the whole world. But prayer is not simply that we ask and we get answered. And we're told that every prayer is listened to and makes a mark. But we all don't always get what we ask for. And sometimes what we're asking for is not what we really need. But every prayer makes a mark. And so when we go back and try to understand how Moshe was not answered, but in a certain way it was answered. Why? Is because Moshe's longing to come into the land of Israel was so intense that the mark that it left was on the Jewish soul for every generation. to never, ever give up the desire to be in the land of Israel. And so we know from our history, we were in exile for 2,000 years. After the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, we were in exile for 2,000 years until approximately 120 years ago, when Jews began to come back, even though during those 2,000 years there was always a Jewish presence in Israel. It was very small, but there was never a time, from the time Avram first came to Israel, there was never a time that there wasn't a presence in the land. Even after we went down to Egypt, we returned. When we went down to Babylon, we returned. When we were exiled from Rome, now we returned again. And so that desire, that refusing to give up our hold, our connection to our holy land, that was seeded by Moshe. And even though it might look on the surface that he wasn't answered, he planted the seed of this intrinsic connection of never giving up. And that's why for 2,000 years we prayed 3 times a day to come back to Eretz Yisrael. There's no people on the face of the earth who have ever been exiled from their homeland for that long who eventually came back. And so here we see Moshe, the Et Hanan equals 515. 515 equals Tefillah. And these 515 prayers of Moshe is, in a very, very deep way, is what helped bring us back to where we are today, back in Eretz Yisrael. And Be'ezrat Hashem, Jews from all over the world will join us. And Be'ezrat Hashem, at the time of Mashiach, there will be the final ingathering of all the Jews back to our homeland.